Thanks, Derek and Claire. So my name is Stephen Vance. With me tonight is
someone who had a little trouble coming off of mute. I'm Casey. I'm the Director of Business Development for Chicago Cityscape.
So the last time I presented to Shy Hack Night about Chicago Cityscape was in September of 2014. Chicago Cityscape turned 7 years old in April, so that means that the first presentation was just a few months after founding. And I'm going to go over the agenda real quick. So for people who aren't familiar with Chicago Cityscape, I'm going to briefly go over what that is and talk about who uses Chicago Cityscape. And then I'm going to talk about recent updates that we've made to the platform in response to societal changes. And then Casey will go into why we decided to ask to present tonight, which is that we have a grant. And he's going to tell us what that grant entails and how we want you to participate in us executing the grant funded program. And then we're actually going to be hiring. So actually, that's another big Chicago Cityscape news, is that Casey is the first full-time employee of Chicago Cityscape, I guess, after myself. Although I never really considered myself an employee because I just kind of work all the time whenever so it wasn't a well-organized thing. So Chicago Cityscape is a real estate information platform that makes neighborhood, property, and construction development data accessible to all. And this has been the first sentence of the About Us web page for all 7 years, actually, because I think it does a pretty succinct job of describing what the product is, but it's not exactly our mission statement. And so Casey will talk about what her mission statement is. If you've never been to chicagocityscape.com, this is what you would see. There are a lot of different colors of map markers, and they all represent different things that are happening now or very soon in Chicago. The red marker indicates a development that is significant at the neighborhood or regional level. The green markers indicate proposed projects. Proposed project is something that a homeowner or a business or a larger property developer wants permission to do on a particular piece of land. And then the blue markers indicate building permits that have been issued recently for new construction, large new construction projects and major renovation projects. So it's really just a quick overview of stuff that's happening in the city. And if you're brand new to the website, just move the map around and read the different labels on those icons to really see that there's a lot of stuff that's happening in Chicago all the time when it comes to neighborhood, block level property development. So I want to give you some trivia about Chicago Cityscape. It was originally founded as a way to get objective information about general contractors in Chicago. It doesn't actually do that anymore, except that it shows building permits. So you can see that a contractor was given a permit to do a basement renovation at your neighbor's house. Chicago Cityscape was bootstrapped with a Mailchimp newsletter and a Stripe credit card form. And this is something that there are other platforms out there, the biggest one being Substack, that do really easily. But back then, this is what I had access to. It was also really cheap to do that. And so people paid $40 a year to get a newsletter about building permits. Cityscape is much more than that now. Cityscape benefited immensely and probably would not have been founded if not for Shy Hack Night. And so when Shy Hack Night started in 2011, and then when I founded Chicago Cityscape in 2014, we were all learning about how to use open data, how to ask for open data, how to get cities to actually perform on their adopted open data policies. And Chicago has one of the most robust open data portals in the country. And so that's where Chicago Cityscape got a lot of its data, and with the help of other people at Shy Hack Night, was able to understand and develop systems to kind of automate things and understand city policies and processes, and it still does that today. And then last little trivia is that Chicago Cityscape integrates now over 130 data sources that are all documented in our data dictionary. So Chicago Cityscape now has over 300 paying members, or just a tad over 300, out of 13,800 accounts. So that includes real estate brokers, property developers, nonprofit organizations, staff, attorneys, bankers, consultants, even a couple of city hall staffers, and then just thousands of interested residents who just want to know, like, when the Culver's is going to open up next to the Montrose Brown Line station. And so we organized those 130 data sources in primarily two ways: the address way and the place way. And so address snapshot is a collection of all the data about a particular address, as well as goings on in the surrounding block. And then we have the most data in Chicago. And as you go further out of Chicago into the rest of Illinois, we have less and less data. And then at the place snapshot level, that is all this data collected around a place. And a place is an area. It could be a legislative district. It could be a ward, a community area, a neighborhood, a zip code, and you can even draw your own places. And then it's not just data. We have also developed insights that we can program into the platform. And so when you're looking at an address, and you want to develop something there, whether it's a new building or a business, you need to know what the zoning code says is allows you to do there. And rather than try to teach you how to read the zoning code, we can actually just program a tool or a feature that helps you understand the zoning code. And then on the place side, one thing that's important to property developers, real estate brokers, and also local housing and community-based organizations is knowing where amenities and community assets are. And then, so now I'm going to tell you about a few things that we've been doing in the last year. So after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis a year and a month ago, Chicago Cityscape, like a lot of other businesses, individuals, or other organizations, started looking inwardly to see what they could do to be anti-racist. And anti-racist means that you're beyond just not being racist. It is you are actively trying to dismantle the systems of white supremacy and racism in the United States. And us being a real estate information platform, that means we are connected to the history of racism in real estate, in lending, also just data collection can also have be prejudicial in certain ways and be biased. And so we had to recognize that in our staff, as well as with our advisory board, which helped us identify what those ways that were connected to this. And then as our response was reprioritizing our feature roadmap to better serve different groups that weren't exactly always our paying members. And then one more thing, which I'll get into in just a minute. Well, I guess that minute has come. So we were doing a lot of business development back in March, April, and May. And then we switched to doing outreach. And so we wanted to offer free memberships to, at the time, nonprofit housing organizations who were dealing with the second pandemic of COVID-19. A lot of their constituents were at risk of not paying their mortgages or not paying their rent and perhaps getting evicted or foreclosed. And we thought we could help them provide some data or insights as they needed. Unfortunately, this idea failed. We realized after just talking to a few organizations that we weren't going to be able to help in the way that we were hoping to, for two reasons, two main reasons, probably lots of reasons. Very few organizations, well, none of the ones that we talked to had a staff member who could dedicate their time or had the knowledge to do data acquisition, mapping, and other analysis. It would have been great if we could do it for them, but we also don't have that time. And so, well, how do you make staff efficient? Well, one way is using technology, which we have a lot of, but we didn't actually have the right technology at the time to help them. And that's why we're here tonight to talk to you about, we have a proposal to deal with that. But before we get into that, which Casey will do, I want to just give you two previews of this feature roadmap that we reprioritized and already have launched. So on the left is the lending and investment snapshot. And this is a new feature that works at the block level as well as the neighborhood level. And it shows things like small business lending, home mortgages, it shows property sales, it shows demographics, and it also shows this public investment. And so if you're a real estate developer and you want to develop in underserved neighborhoods, it helps to know like what are the other things that help support new development. The city has always, cities in general and in Chicago as well, are always putting public funds to help small businesses, to help neighborhood organizations. And this is a way to see all of that activity in one screen. And so we've collected data on 3 different ways that the city spends public money to serve underinvested neighborhoods. And then on the right side is amenities and social infrastructure. And so I had already mentioned earlier that real estate brokers like to use this in their marketing, but also it is important to do community asset mapping when you're trying to attract development to an area. And so this was just a really clean way to show on a map, which you don't see, but also just to summarize, well, Little Village, we know, has 10 grocery stores, and it has 2 libraries and 4 community centers based on the best available data. And so we also are very transparent about our sources and where the data comes from, and also how people can help us improve and correct the data. And then also part of our outreach last summer, so we talked to just a handful of housing organizations. It didn't work out. We did give out a few free memberships. So we contacted the Chicago Community Trust, which is arguably the most connected philanthropic organization in Chicago, and asked, can you help us with our outreach? Because we're struggling here. When they heard our pitch, their idea was, rather than us connecting you to people, because we can do that, we think it would be more advantageous for both our organizations if you asked us for a capacity building grant. And so they coached us on how to do that. And we wrote one and we got one. And so that's what Casey's going to talk about right now.
Hey, awesome. Thanks for the intro, Stephen. And hello again to everybody. And just one more time to echo what Stephen said about Shy Hack Night being a part of our foundation, not only as a company, but also with our mission here at Cityscape. We're focused so much more just like on the bottom line for what most software companies are. We wouldn't be in this position that we're in right now if it weren't for the openness and the collaboration from Shy Hack Night. So thanks for hosting us, and just thanks for this forum in general. I want to touch on 2 things as we start here: our mission as a company, and then what we want to do with our data equity cohort. So to start, our mission at Chicago Cityscape is to spark and inspire more equitable development in Chicago's overlooked and underinvested in neighborhoods. I don't think it's hard for any of us to imagine how inequitable Chicago can be. It's obvious if you drive through most neighborhoods, particularly those on the south and west side. Although they are not as resourced as many of the ones that some of us might be more familiar with, like mine in Albany Park, they all have assets there. And what we're doing within Cityscape as a company and with the data equity cohort is beginning to highlight more of those assets that are in those neighborhoods. So specifically, our aim with the data equity cohort is to empower organizations and individuals to use a more data-informed approach to attracting the investment and guiding the community development that they needed. Before I was working with Stephen here at Cityscape, I was running a community center for 7 years. So data-informed approaches or community development might be some lingo that not everybody's familiar with. So in this next slide, I'm going to break down what that actually means to us and how we hope to frame it for the context of this conversation. Stephen, can you jump to the next slide? Thank you. So a data-formed approach. Let's have some fun and let's talk about what it's not. A data-formed approach is not sitting at the cafe saying, no one cares about our community. It's not walking out of your place of worship and stepping on a pothole and seeing a street light that needs to be fixed and saying, no one puts any investment here. It's not pointing the finger at your local alderman. What we think a data-formed approach is kind of rather than pointing the finger, it's pulling the thumb and taking accountability for what's going on in the neighborhood and working to fix it on your own or with a coalition. So this is what a data-informed approach might sound like. We have 24 vacant lots that are in a TIF district here, and it's zoned for mixed use. We also know that we have a lack of affordable housing in our neighborhood, and the nearest community center is 7 miles away. Let's talk to our local alderperson about a coalition of community members that we have that would like to build a relationship with local developers to attract the type of development our neighborhood deserves. You know who knows this information about your neighborhood? Starbucks, Wendy's. And I have nothing against those corporations. They employ plenty of people in our city. But what we want to do is put our organizations and individuals that are part of our data equity cohort, let's call it like in an offensive position. We want you to know the assets in your neighborhood so you can attract the type of development that you deserve. So what we need to do is we need to become better networked and integrated with these focus organizations and individuals. And here's what those definitions look like to us. A member of our data equity cohort as an individual could be an emerging or maybe a less experienced real estate developer, but one that has a mission focus, particularly those of color. It could be your small business oriented nonprofit organizations. So think of like your Chamber of Commerce, your local community development corporation, or like an SSA or a special service area. It could also be housing development and advocacy organizations, as well as cooperatives and land trusts. Those are the type of individuals and organizations that we want to become better networked with and work alongside through the data equity cohort. And these are the types of activities and efforts that we're going to be undertaking during the data equity cohort. And it's much more of a back and forth than you might see than relationships with other software companies or software as a service platforms. First and foremost, Cityscape, we're going to continue to coach our current members and those that we become more strongly networked with on how to leverage our platform as it currently exists. But we also know that we have room for improvement. So we want the members that are part of the data equity cohort to coach us on the data that they need and the functions that are going to help them fulfill their missions. Again, back on the Cityscape side of the court, we're going to take that advice and feedback from our cohort members and build as many solutions as possible that fit their specific needs. And again, turn that back around to the cohort for the data equity cohort and any other members who can be using Cityscape and coaching them how to fully leverage our platform to understand community assets and needs and use the platform Cityscape to attract the type of investment and development that their communities deserve. Jump to the next one, Stephen. Here's how you can participate or support the data equity cohort. And keep in mind, we wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for members of Shy Hack Night and the community that exists around this. If you identify as one of the leaders in the focus organizations or individuals that I spoke about before, hit us up. We'd love to talk with you, whether it's grabbing coffee at your local shop or through a Zoom. We'd love to hear from you and look through ways that you could fit into the data equity cohort. If you know of organizations that you think fit the groups that we talked about, again, housing organizations, chambers of commerce, community development orgs, either connect us with them or please refer them to Cityscape and the data equity cohort. And lastly, if you're just interested in Cityscape and what it can do for your individual company or an organization in your neighborhood, reach out to me. My email is here down at the bottom, and we'd love to just put together an introductory conversation about how we could work alongside you. Thank you so much, and I'm going to kick it back to Stephen.
So the grant funded a couple of things. It's Chicago Cityscape and the Chicago Community Trust, and the grant from the trust, which is through the Searle Funds, is co-investing and being able to hire Casey full-time. And then it also has some funding to hire an additional staff member to help us with the interviews and the feedback that we're going to get from those interviews with the cohort. And so what we're going to be looking for is someone who can help us structure discussions, synthesize the feedback from those discussions, assist us in turning that feedback into new solutions. And then this position would be an independent contractor position for 10 months. And so if that sounds like, if everything we've described sounds like something you're interested in doing, watch for our job notice in July on our LinkedIn page. I find looking for jobs very easy on LinkedIn. We'll also be posting it on our website and our newsletter, and probably sharing it through Twitter and word of mouth and so forth. But this is exciting for me because now I get to manage people and not just manage software. And I'm open, and I want to hear all of the questions, and hopefully we've explained it perfectly. And you just want to know like about where our data comes from. But yeah, let's start the Q&A.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Stephen and Casey. Yeah, so for folks who are on the live chat, if you haven't already, go ahead and start typing your questions directly in the live chat, and we will add them to our queue of questions, and Claire and I will take turns asking them. I can go ahead and do the first one. It looks like we got a question from Daniel Basil. Do you have layers of demographic data and poverty indicators on the Cityscape site?
Yes, in our lending and investment snapshot, it has demographic information, and it's all selected demographic information. So it's just a variety of metrics that we've put there based on feedback. So it includes information about population, about the number of renter households and owner-occupied households, the median rents that people pay. And what I think is unique about looking up demographic information this way is that you don't need to know your census tract or know how to look for your census tract. If you just click on Logan Square, for example, it will grab collectively all of the data for all of the census tracts that overlap Logan Square. And you can even do it for a shape of your drawing, of your choosing, and it'll grab the data that overlaps that customized area. One thing that we do not show on there, or a few things that we do not show on there, is crime. Now, that's not necessarily a demographic, but we don't show crime data because of the intense biases that are built into that. And we don't show race or income, which are available elsewhere. You can get it. It's just too often that information can be used to choose to not invest in a place. And so we're just trying to focus on the metrics that show the assets of a place.
And I'll just follow that up quickly with Dan. Often when people ask us questions about the data that's available, that's the first of like 20 questions that they have. If you want kind of a deeper dive in Cityscape, let me know, because in addition to the demographics that Stephen talked about, because you asked specifically about poverty, we can also show you like business licenses information and proposed projects in that neighborhood that aren't necessarily an indication of poverty, but it can show a lack of or the pace of development and investment in that neighborhood. And that might be underneath some of the other questions that you have.
Okay, next question is, does Cityscape go beyond the city of Chicago's borders?
Yes. Chicago Cityscape has property information for all of Cook County. It has the demographic information for all of Illinois. It has all of the legislative districts for all of Illinois. And it has a lot of other data sets, but it is really focused on Chicago because for two main reasons. This is where most of the data exists. Most other cities in Illinois do not have the level or quality of data that Chicago provides. And this is also just where the most developable land exists and the most potential exists. And it's just where we focused our efforts. And it's also where I live. And so it's really easy to keep up on changing policies.
Cool. Next one, I guess is kind of jumping off from the previous question around the data that you have. So you mentioned that there are about 130 data sets in Cityscape. Can you speak a little bit more about those, and how did you go about growing it over the 7 years that you've been doing this?
So it started with just trying to figure out who are the licensed general contractors in Chicago. It was a kind of a personal issue. Like I wanted to find a GC to help with a project, but there's no way that I could find the GC that was an expert in the kind of type of project that I wanted. And so you can go to Yelp, and you can go to Angie's List, and there's Home Advisor, I think it's called, and you can like fill out a survey, and like GCs will contact you. But I don't really like that way. I wanted to show me your experience and your results. And I thought, okay, building permits, that kind of does that, because I can at least sift through and say that, okay, this company does mostly big projects. This company does small projects. I'm going to talk to the small company because I have a small project. And then it was like, that problem, I solved it. I didn't have that problem anymore. What's next is, well, we can layer on all this data to get a picture of what's happening in a neighborhood. Building permits is a really great way, because you can see new construction buildings before they start. Because a common question is, you're walking to the L station and something new has happened between the last time you walked to the L station and today. And you're like, who is doing what there? And Cityscape can probably tell you, because there's probably a record of it, that a company, Acme Construction, has pulled a permit to build a 3-flat. And so now you know, and now your curiosity is satisfied, and you're happy that there's going to be 3 new houses for people to live in your neighborhood. But that's not the only type of development or the only type of data that you want to know sometimes. You want to know stuff that's coming down the pipeline. And so that's what the zoning change applications are about. Or you want to know if you work for a social services organization that tries to help your clients find affordable housing. Well, where is the affordable housing? And so using data sets from the federal government and from the city of Chicago, as well as the Cook County Housing Authority, we can piece together a picture of how many subsidized affordable housing units are in any given neighborhood. And actually that's useful for another reason, because there are policies against over concentrating affordable housing, so that there's not a concentration of poverty, and so that people are able to live in higher resource neighborhoods with better quality schools, more amenities, closer, better transportation access to jobs, and so on. And so that's just like 5 data sets right there. If you go on our website, at the bottom, there's a link called sources. Click on that, and there's 130 in there. And it's actually not all of them, because I'm still documenting all the sources that we use, and trying to give it details of like, well, where you can click on a link to go to the ultimate source of the organization that created the data. You can see what we use it for and how often we update it.
Excellent. Another audience question. How did you make the connection to Chicago Community Trust? Did you seek help from other organizations in your local area? This person is seeking community partners and grant options for my own small business.
So I'm changing the slide to that page, or that slide, where I talked about the Chicago Community Trust. They had formed something last year called the Community Desk, which is kind of like a one-stop shop or a little clearinghouse, so that even if you don't know what you want or need from the trust or what they can offer you, they created this community desk that people could call or email and get that question answered. So it's a less structured way of being able to connect with the trust, so that you don't have to know exactly which grant program that they offer that you could be eligible for. So it was actually just reaching out through that community desk, because I saw a news article that they had, or maybe it was a press release, that they had created that thing.
And you had gone to them asking for advice, not money. There's
Yeah.
a saying in the grant world: ask for advice, and you can get money. Ask for money, and you'll get advice.
That was not my strategy. It just happened that way.
Cool. I'll take the next question. Are there companies or platforms in other cities similar to Cityscape? And if so, have you connected with them?
Yes. I have a list of like 30 similar companies. Not all of them are as hyper local as Chicago Cityscape. The one that is most similar is called Scout Red, and it's for San Diego County, California. And I have talked to Alex, the founder there, many times. And I'm going to preemptively answer this question. Have we considered expanding to other cities? Because our customers ask us all the time, because many of our real estate developer customers are active in more than one city. And they're like, oh, I'd love for you to bring this to Nashville. And a couple issues with that. To know a city so deeply as Chicago Cityscape knows Chicago and is able to present these policy-based insights, would mean that we would need local staff who understand those same urban planning principles that are contextual for Nashville and knows where the data comes from for Nashville. And also it's really expensive to do all that. Like to build a copy of Chicago Cityscape would just require so many resources. And I'm just not plugged into the venture capital world. So it's probably not going to happen unless someone comes to me.
Next question. Are you a 501c3 nonprofit? I thought the trust in most foundations only made grants to registered nonprofits. I asked because of the .com on your web address.
Yeah, so Chicago Cityscape is an LLC registered in Illinois, not Delaware. And we have a fiscal sponsor, the North River Commission, that is receiving the funds from the Chicago Community Trust on our behalf. And they are also responsible for making sure that we spend the funds the way that we've said in our budget.
I'll do the next one. So how do you and the community organizations ensure that development doesn't displace residents or price them out of the neighborhood?
I don't think we can do that. I think we can try our best to present the data in such a way that helps everyone who's reading the data understand the ramifications. And pretty much any single piece of data or insight that Chicago Cityscape shows can be used by both sides of development. It can be used to find properties that are in distress or have distressed owners. And it can also be used to find owners in distress to give them additional resources. And so it is a battle that we fight every single day. And we try to be transparent about that. And you'll find that in our social media posts, in our newsletters. And also we try to annotate all the data as well. When did this came up recently? I forget now. Oh, it came up with zoning capacity. So zoning capacity is this thing where you have a property that has 2 units, but the zoning rules allow you to have 5 units. And so that could mean 2 things. It could mean that somebody buys that property, demolishes it, displaces the people who live there, and builds a 5-unit building in its place. It could also mean that the owner of that property who lives in that property adds more units to earn more income for themselves or to provide more housing for their family, for their extended family. And that's a situation that's realistic and actually happens in Chicago, that there are multi-generational families that need to have the legal capacity to expand their house, their physical house, as well as their household.
And I'll add, for somebody who is smart enough to ask that question, probably has a head, a heart, and a network to connect us with organizations who would be great for the data equity cohort. So thank you for your question. We don't ever avoid conversations like that. And it seems like you know people who we know, or organizations, individuals who we should talk to. So please jump at the opportunity to connect us.
And the next question. Okay, Someone says, great presentation. It's great to connect to orgs using a diversity and equity lens. How will you address the lack of people devoted to looking at data within underrepresented orgs to be able to provide feedback on what data and functions might be relevant for their projects?
Oh yeah, we're building that into our program by way of structuring our interviews to kind of extract those ideas from the people we interview, and then always use every interview to find the next person or organization to interview. But the other thing that's part of our, let me see if we have that on a slide. So when Casey was talking about a two-way relationship, we also want to coach the interviewees about our platform, about all the data that we have and all the data that we don't have, so that they can then use our platform for several months for free and understand the limitations that they have, the limitations that we have, and then hopefully the two of us will bring our heads together and come up with how do we blow through those limitations and how do we add those new solutions.
I'll do the next one here. So you mentioned a few slides back that you're changing your roadmap to make Chicago Cityscape an anti-racist platform and make your organization anti-racist. What aspects of the current real estate industry do you think are racist or prejudiced that you'd like to see changed?
I have not put those ideas into an organized way yet, but part of this process has also been me further educating myself on the history of racist real estate practices in Chicago. Thankfully, there are like 10 books out there, all written in the last 15 years, some even written in the last like 3 years about this. Where the book is not within reach, but otherwise I would grab it and show it. So the one I'm reading now is called After Redlining by Rebecca Marchiel. And it's about the urban reinvestment activism that started in Austin, the neighborhood Austin, not Austin, Texas. And neighborhood reinvestment is the antidote to neighborhood disinvestment. And so they came up with this really great list of 11 ways that redlining still exists. And this is back in 1975, or actually 1965 through 75, that this activism in Austin neighborhood is happening. Richard J. Daley was the mayor. And so I'm wanting to republish that list. It comes from the book. I found the original source of it. And I want to put that out there so that we can all recognize these things together. And so now I'm getting to answer the question. And so there are a couple things on there that the real estate industry itself has already acknowledged is a problem that the industry wants to work on, specifically the brokerage side of residential real estate, and that's appraisals. And there have been, I think, at least 4 articles in the past several months about appraisals and the racism in appraisals. And the stories are very similar to each other, and they go like this. A Black person owns a house and wants to sell it. They have people come through their house, interested buyers. They get an offer. The offer is very low, and that's because the appraisal is very low. And then the bank is like, well, I can't give anybody a loan on such a low value house. And so now you don't really have a buyer anymore because you don't want to sell it for such a low price. And so you think that, oh, shoot, I'm getting a low appraisal because I'm Black. And then what they do as an experiment is that they remove all evidence that a Black person lives there. They take down the photos, they take down whatever decorations they have that make it obvious. And then they leave and they have a friend of theirs who's white come to the house and greet interested homebuyers. Offer comes in, the offer is higher, or the appraisal is higher. And so this has happened and been documented many times. And also like it's a problem. It was a problem in the 60s and 70s, and it's still a problem now. And the brokerage association, not brokerage, the Association of Realtors has acknowledged that this is an issue. I don't know if they've really come out with ideas that are actually likely to mitigate the issue. So one thing that we can do as civic hackers and housing activists is disclosure. And so that was what the activists in Austin in the 1960s and 70s were getting to, was having laws passed that would force banks and mortgage issuers to disclose the location and the value of mortgages, as well as whether or not an application was denied. Because that was another thing. You could call a bank and say, I'd like a loan, here's the house I want to buy. And they would say, we're not issuing loans in that area, and hang up. There was no evidence or record that such a denial happened. And so a bank could claim that they were actually issuing loans to 100% of people who applied. But there were people who applied that just never got noted because it was just a phone call. And so the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, which WBEZ did a really great investigation with last summer, was that first disclosure. 1975 was adopted nationwide. Chicago actually beat it by a couple of years with our own disclosure law. And so you could have another disclosure law about appraisals. And so you could have appraisals be reported to a reporting agency like a city Department of Housing or a state Department of Housing. And so that we could have data on where and why appraisals are very low, and like too low to get loans for. So very long answer, but right now I think we should focus at least on appraisals.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like the solution there is a legislative one, right? And that they need to be compelled to disclose this information. That's the only real way to do it, is by having the government make it mandatory. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's one step. Another step is that the industry is self-regulated. I don't know if it needs government regulation, but maybe it just needs more transparency. And so the appraisal membership association has its own standards. To become a certified appraisal, you have to adhere to these standards. But how good are those standards? Do we know how those are performed or executed? But I think that disclosing actual appraisals is a first step.
Great, thank you.
All right, next question. Do you know of groups who are teaching people to use data the way you envision and create data stories on a regular basis?
I mean, ShyHackNet kind of does that, not with like formal training all the time, but you know, it's very ad hoc and still useful because it addresses individuals' needs. But as far as like, I don't know, classes that you could take, I'm not aware of any.
Okay, next question. Actually, this one's for Casey. What kinds of data tools did you wish that you had at your previous job?
Yeah, Stephen, jump back to the slide where I talked about what data-formed development or community development is not. I didn't know of Cityscape when I was in my job previously, but I was the director of development. Ironically, I actually never won a grant from Chicago Community Trust when I was raising funds as a fundraiser, but we won one as a company. But I always wish I had more information on the level of business investment. I was managing a workforce development program when I first started at the Albany Park Community Center. And it would have been great if I would have showed, hey, you know, when we said there's a lack of investment in our neighborhood, I mean, we get less TIF funds, we get less SPIF funds, no neighborhood opportunity funds have come into our neighborhood. And we could, even with Cityscape, you can show if there is a slowdown or an increase with business license applications, which is a sign of employment opportunities in your neighborhood. So rather than just saying there's no jobs in your neighborhood, that may be true, but you can prove if it is or if it is not within Chicago Cityscape. I wish I would have used more data like that when I was the director of development for the Albany Park Community Center. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. think maybe we have time for one more, Claire.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a sense yet of some of the new solutions you might build for the data equity cohort? And how far outside your existing platform are you willing and able to build?
Good thing this wasn't the first question, because this would have taken up all of the time.
We do keep meticulous notes about all of our conversations with potential and existing customers. A couple of ones that, or at least one that has come up repeatedly, is knowing where vacant storefronts are. And this totally is a data and mapping and geography problem that many organizations, namely special service areas, which are Chicago's term for business improvement districts, the way that they accomplish this is by walking down the street with a notebook and writing down the address of every storefront that's for sale or for lease, and then maybe writing down the name of the person to call. And that's really tedious. It's hard to update. It's hard to turn that data into actionable formats like maps that you can share with your board or your fundraisers or your older persons. And so part of our interviews with our cohort will be offering some of ideas to hopefully spark their own ideas. We're not going to push ideas on them because we want the ideas to come from our cohort. But that's one that has come up repeatedly. And so one possible solution to that is using a kind of a crowdsourcing model, but using a sustainable platform like Chicago Cityscape to be the host for that crowdsourced data.
One question I have, so you'd be collecting the data from some other platform and then putting it on Chicago Cityscape?
The way I envision it is that the interested business improvement districts would add the data themselves on an ongoing basis, and then the data would kind of expire after 6 months. Because that's the other thing, is how do we know that vacant storefront that we captured 3 months ago has been occupied now? And so we just need the data to kind of disappear and have to be constantly updated so that we have accuracy, because that's another big issue. We have collection is one issue, and then we have accuracy as the second issue.
And maybe a story could help illustrate this. I've been part of the Albany Park Neighborhood Association for a number of years, and something that we've done, and it's a great effort, is garbage pickup along like Lawrence, Kedzie, and Kimball Avenue. It's a good effort. It always needs to be done. So organizations could possibly plug into Cityscape, and rather than doing a garbage pickup day, they could do a commercial district canvas day and walk a series of blocks, take photos, record information within Cityscape, and crowdsource that information onto our platform. That's the dream. Please don't call us next week and ask when that's ready. But that's the dream.
Nice. Well, thank you both so much for your time. I think we're just about, we're just a little minute over here. So Stephen and Casey, thank you again for presenting at ChiHack Night. And I think we are going to switch gears to the civic hacking portion. So for folks who want to join, you can go to, we're going to get a slide here in a second. We're going to go to bit.ly/CHN remote Zoom. That'll take you to a Zoom room, and several of us will be in there, and we'll do some breakout groups and intros and stuff like that. So again, thanks to our presenters tonight. And Claire, I'll let you do the honors. You want to send us off?
Okay, do I mind doing it by myself? Or?
Yeah, well,
okay. All right, I'll do it. Okay, so stay safe. Take care and go forth and hack.
Go forth and hack.